Tony Khan started telling people there's no such thing as long-term booking anymore. It's week to week. And when I heard that, I was like, what? He didn't really say that. But if you watch the shows, that's what happened.
All right, breaking my own rule again. Second time in a row. There's a lot of things I'm doing in a row nowadays. Upload another video, not even 3 hours since uploading the last video, but we gotta talk about this. This cannot be true. This cannot be true. This is one of the dumbest fucking things I think I've ever heard, period, in professional wrestling. And not just that, it's an outright contradiction of what the hell this man said earlier. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Bruh, this man... Now, obviously, let's give the caveat here. Maybe Tony Khan didn't say this. I'm going to read you an article in a little bit, and two things can either be or not be. Either A, Tony Khan is he just completely contradicted himself outright, or he just flat out doesn't believe in the philosophy anymore, which would be very consistent with some of the things that he has put in place that he no longer does anymore, or at least keeps up with, like that whole fucking top 25 shit he was doing, or the top ranking, or the power 25, whatever the fuck he was doing back in the days. So it wouldn't be out of character for him to not follow up on this. Or B, maybe Brian Alvarez is lying. And maybe he misinterpreted, maybe he misheard. I would find that very hard to believe. You know what I mean? Maybe the person he talked to is lying. That could be a possibility. But for Brian Alvarez to just come out and just say it, that's one of the wildest things I think I ever heard a promoter say, if that happens to be true. Let's just pretend for a second this is true. Tony Khan is outright telling everyone that long-term booking is no longer a thing, that booking week to week is the new thing, which makes all the sense in the world when you look at the television program, right? Outside of maybe Swerve Strickland and Hangman Adam Page, which, by the way, that was off and on. Granted, again, another caveat that had more to do with Hangman Adam Page taking time off so many fucking times. But regardless, I mean, yeah, outside of Swerve and Hangman, like, they don't have any long-term booking plans, which leads you to believe what's going to happen with Ricochet and Will Ospreay is exactly what I said is going to happen. There's going to be some bullshit that's going to happen next week or in 2 more weeks at Grand Slam, right? And they're going to run this back again at Wrestle Dream. And the entire reasoning for doing all this is because he has Ricochet and Will Ospreay. But can I read this article for you real quick, guys? Just so you can see how inconsistent he is. I absolutely remember this from a couple of years ago. Check this out. I can't remember what date this was, but here, regardless. Tony Khan discusses AEW approach to long-term booking. AEW president Tony Khan has discussed his approach to booking long-term storylines. Speaking with PW Torch, Khan pointed out that plans can change quickly, using Jon Moxley's 2020 AEW World Championship reign as an example, noting that he sticks to his guns around 2 out of 3 times, Khan said. And I quote, "Previous plans have changed. A lot of the plans I had when Jon Moxley beat Chris Jericho, we did do a lot of those things I wanted to do, but a lot of those things were not possible because the pandemic hit. I do have plans. You never know how they are going to change. I do have a lot of plans. Kenny is on one of the great runs, and I'm not so sure we're ready to see it end, but on the other hand, Hangman is ready, and there are a lot of fans behind him." So this was probably back in 2020 or 2021, most likely 2021. When asked how often he sticks to plans, he says, "It's probably 2 out of 3 times. 1 out of 3 times something changes, and goddamn it, it's not what you expected. Somebody gets sick, and then you put a replacement in, and then that starts going well, and you move in another direction. So I would say it's probably about 2 out of 3 times if I draw up stuff." And mind you, this is him barely maybe 3 years ago. That's what it sounds like, just given the context of how he's talking about Kenny Omega and Hangman Adam Page. This is probably back in 2021. It just boggles the mind how one person can go from one extreme to the next. And you got to think this is all coming off of the desperation because of the ratings, because of the viewership numbers. But that's just wild to outright tell someone, or go around apparently allegedly telling everyone that long-term booking doesn't mean anything anymore. So, okay, then what's the incentive of watching this programming anymore? Like straight up, I gotta say this. Like, for the people out there outside of the AEW faithful who don't care one way or the other, talking to normal fans, talking to casual wrestling fans, this is the guy who's outright telling you there should be no reason to have to be invested into any story. Now, again, could be fake as far as, Brian Alvarez is concerned, because again, Brian Alvarez could be getting it from a source who doesn't know what they're talking about. But like I said, we have eyes, we can see the product. Outside of Swerve and Hangman recently, you haven't seen any long-term booking. What you've been seeing, I think MJF and Will Ospreay is a perfect example of that, is a guy who would just book just for the pay-per-view. Just for the pay-per-view. And honestly, sometimes just for the show, and then we go along with the pay-per-view. See, now it all makes sense, honestly, too, in regards to how he books, as to why we never have anything substantial being booked in the main event, and why we get so many superstars on one given show, only having like one segment. At best, maybe two. I can count on one hand and that's how rare it is. I can honest to God count on one hand how many times we've seen a superstar, for an example, get an opener, then they come back to the segment in the middle, and then they close the show out after talking about what happened in the beginning and in the middle. It's rare. It's super duper rare. Even rare if it happens with the World Heavyweight Champion. That's what I mean. I just put a video out on this. This is the prior video. This is kind of like a continuation of it. There's no priorities within this company whatsoever. They just do what they feel is not even right, not even what's necessary. They just do whatever they fucking want to do. So I'm going to reiterate this again for the people out there who feel like they want to give AEW a chance. Why? Huh? Why? He's essentially telling you don't invest in any other wrestlers. He's essentially telling you don't invest in any of the stories. Can you imagine watching an episodic television show? Can you imagine watching something on Netflix and you're highly invested into whatever show it is, and then in the middle of the season you get someone telling you, well, I mean, there's really no end goal. We're just kind of trying to fill out how the fans how the fans are going to operate, how they're going to actually connect to whatever show that we're seeing at the moment, what episode we're seeing at the moment, and then we're going to write the next episode as it's ongoing in the season. Not we're going to plan all this out, have a great story, and we take the fans on a ride, we guide them the way we want to guide them. It's, nah, let's see how the fans react to this episode, and then we'll write next week's episode. Not only is that an insult to your fans, to care so fucking little, to be so fucking lazy, to not have things planned out that drastically ahead of time, to the degree that you poorly actually plan things out, that you're doing this on a week in and week out basis, it's just counterproductive. It's no different than saying you're living paycheck to paycheck. Like, how do you do that? You can't live paycheck to paycheck, not as a grown adult at least. How do you do that? Like, there has to be some type of sustainability. There has to be some type of emergency fund. There has to be some kind of plan going forward into the future. Otherwise, I mean, so like, for an example, if your car breaks down, then what? What are you going to do? Huh? If by chance your roof caves in, what are you going to do? What if there is a medical emergency, a health emergency, anything along the lines of that? What are you going to do? Because you're living paycheck to paycheck. Put a percentage of it up and plan thoroughly. When you're in AEW shoes, like they said, what if someone becomes sick? Huh? You have this long-term planning thing out. You should be able to have a backup plan associated with what's going on currently with that plan going forward. For an example, you look at, say, something in WWF back in the days. What's a given example you could probably just throw out there, just all willy-nilly? WrestleMania 19, for an example, right? The original main event, from my understanding, was supposed to be Rock and Austin. But apparently Austin, he was going through a bunch of, I can't remember exactly what he went through. I don't know if it was like high blood pressure, or if it was like super anxiety, something along the lines of that. I can't really remember the medical diagnosis. But, you know, Austin was not 100%. And they they were afraid that if they put Austin in that spot against Rock in the main event, that it would bomb, and they did not want the main event of WrestleMania bombing. And look how many backup plans that they had that they could have easily inserted inside that main event spot. Eventually, it ended up being Brock and Kurt, but theoretically, you could have put Vince and Hogan in that spot. Theoretically, you could have put Triple H and Booker T in that spot, right? Now, granted, it wouldn't have been as good as Kurt Angle and Brock Lesnar, hence why they went with that main event. But it's not to say that they don't have a choice. Hell, you don't have to go that far. You can look at today's day and age. Look at what's going on going into No Mercy. Right now with CM Punk and Drew McIntyre, and with the Bloodline stuff with Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns. Either one of those matches can main event the show. Right? And notice, both matches are long-term booking. Punk and McIntyre have been going at it the entire year from the beginning of January. Cody and Roman go all the way back to 2022. 2023, 2022. That's been a damn near 2-year feud. The Bloodline angle as a whole is 4 years old. You have so much investment into these stories that you could theoretically plug it into any fucking main event on any fucking B show and they'll get over. Yet you have this guy right here essentially saying, and here's something else too, Tony Khan doesn't give a fuck about you. That's essentially what he's saying. If this happens to be true, like, he doesn't give a fuck about you. He's spitting directly in your face. He's booking based off of not only what he wants, but what he thinks you want. It's not even guiding you in the sense of like, oh no, he's purposely trying to guide you into what his philosophy is. Not guide you with the storytelling in itself, getting you from week to week basis. He is guiding you based off of his own philosophy, which is, well, as long as we get a good wrestling match, that's all that matters in the end of the day. That's a spin in your face as a wrestling fan. Like I said, I'm not taking into consideration the AEW fanboys because they'll eat anything up when it comes to AEW. That's the sad state of affairs when it comes to professional wrestling. But talking directly to the casual fans, talking directly to fans who probably would like to give AEW a try, you have a guy outright telling you that he's not going to book to give you something to relate to. He's not going to book in order to give you a favorite superstar. He's not going to book to give you a chance to plunk down $50 for an actual reason to watch the pay-per-view shows, considering that he's the only pay-per-view channel or actual wrestling mainstream outlet that's actually charging still for pay-per-view, and it's such an exorbitant rate no matter what show it is. Whether it's $50 for Wrestle Dream or whether it's $50 for All In, both shows clearly have a distinction in regards to what show happens to be bigger. He'll charge you $50 regardless for any platform, whether it's YouTube, whether it's traditional cable, whether it's through Bleacher Report, it doesn't matter. This same guy charging you all this money for all these platforms is directly spitting in your face by saying he doesn't want to book for you. He doesn't want to give you the opportunity to invest yourself into whatever story to, make that money that you're spending worth it. Instead, it's week to week basis. That's crazy. That's crazy. I think if anybody would have heard anybody else say that, and I know people are like, well, Devontae, what about Vince McMahon? No. Vince McMahon ripping up scripts, trying to find something to attach to, and then eventually using that as a way to kind of produce something long-standing. That's different. You can shit on the idea in itself being bad. I have no problem with that, and I completely understand. You can look at Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns. Technically, that's long-term storytelling. And for the most part, especially after 2017, that feud was garbage. I was done with that. No matter how many good matches they had, and they really haven't had that much outside of WrestleMania in 2015 and the SummerSlam match like 2 years ago. Like, outside of that, like, I can't tell you anything in regards to what they did that was actually fun from a feud standpoint. I would outright tell you that the feud was bad, but at the same time, I'm not going to pretend as if at the very least there was an investment into the characters in itself. Somebody enjoyed the feud because of the story. I might haven't, but someone did, and it was produced, and they thought it through. The same thing can't be said about AEW. I'm sorry, that's just wild. That's just wild. I got to hear some thoughts about this. Actually, before I go on, I'm very curious. Did anyone... Let me see. Did anyone... I got to see this. Did anyone say anything in particular? This is a lie. Swerve versus Hangman and Mariah versus Toni Storm prove this to be a lie. No, I mean, like I said, with Swerve and Hangman, that's debatable, but like I said, it was off and on, so it's not necessarily long-term storytelling. It's pretty inconsistent. But if you want to call that long-term storytelling, I wouldn't. God damn, look at the ass on that girl outside. God damn, sorry, that distracted me. But yeah, no, that right there, no, I wouldn't necessarily say that's long-term storytelling personally. It's too inconsistent for me. That'd be no different. And the same thing could be said about, you know, well, let's focus on Swerve and Heyman first. I don't believe that to be long-term storytelling. That's no different than seeing a part 1 of a movie going all the way back to say 1960 and them doing a part 5 to the same franchise movie back now in 2024. There's like a 65-year difference, you know what I mean? You can't necessarily fixate on that and then ask whether or not that's long-term storytelling, even if it has elements within that can you can go back and you can look at. Long-term storytelling would mean that at the very least they're being consistent from part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4, part 5, and the end goal was the same goal in part 1. If you reach the conclusion of the goal in the first movie, in the second movie is a different goal, in the third movie is a different goal, in the fourth movie is a different goal, in the fifth movie is a different goal, that's not called long-term storytelling. That's just history. You know what I mean? That's just flat out history. So no, I disagree with that context. And in the case of Mariah May and Toni Storm, I wouldn't say that's long-term storytelling also. Like I said, it's all just history. The story in itself doesn't begin until Mariah and Toni actually start to feud. Like, no, that's just the background. I never looked at Triple H and Shawn Michaels and say they've been feuding since 1997 because they became DX in 1997. No, they started to feud in 2002. Like, that's stupid. That's not long-term storytelling. That's just history. That's just a background. Toni Storm and Mariah May, they started to feud for like maybe a month or two. It was very abrupt. It came out of nowhere. It had nothing in regards to semblance as to why we were getting there. 1 minute Mariah May is pandering and playing around with the Maria chick, or whatever the fuck the Japanese chick is. And then the next minute she's angry and she's beating up Toni Storm. It came out of nowhere. I would say that it was one of the hotter feuds in AEW, but, you know, I mean, fuck, it's one of the hotter feuds, and you have a white boy fucking a black chick, and then he gets off of her, and then Lexington Steele is coming to take his place, you know? Like, is there really a comparison? Like, okay, cool, it's, you know what I mean? Like, it's your dick versus this guy's dick who's really, really tiny. It's not really something that I'll really cry home about. And then you see some of the other tweets. That's crazy. Is that why we are getting Ospreay and Ricochet so quickly? 100% Tony got this idea from Chris Jericho, which explains why he still gets TV time based. This seems credible, right until you watch AEW long term and see reoccurring storylines that have been set in motion months before. But that's what I'm saying though, like, that's not long term storytelling. What is set in motion? Like, what do you mean by that? You can't, for an example, use that context with Toni Storm and like Mariah May. That's not long term storytelling. That's just history. Once again, Part 1 reaching its conclusion has nothing to do with Part 5. Those are two separate movies with two separate ideas and two separate goals. Just because it has the same characters doesn't mean they have the exact same goals from the first movie. That's stupid. It's just history. But leave it to AEW fanboys, man. They'll find any way to misconstrue, misinterpret, and purposely take whatever context and make it within their own vision. Well, it must be true, then as our Lord and Savior Tony Khan said it. Always crazy to see when people believe stuff and when not. Again, we have eyes, though. I don't understand. They say things like, oh, I don't know, it's crazy when you believe stuff. And I mean, bro, we have eyes. Let's just hypothetically say, even if the Swerve Strickland and Heyman Adam Page stuff and then Toni Storm and Mariah May stuff was true in regards to long-term storytelling, which I disagree with that premise, but let's just hypothetically say they did legitimately have a long-term storytelling, because when I think of long-term storytelling, I think of CM Punk and Drew McIntyre, who have been feuding since fucking January and is now in October damn near, right? Hypothetically, if it was true, you're talking about two stories out of like, what, 100? And I would want to say story, I'm using that word loosely, it's more so feuds. Nah, I mean, it's pretty clear what you're doing here, but it's fine, man. I get the whole, you know, having to cope with a situation because obviously the narrative doesn't really quite conflict with what you're trying to get across. I get it, I understand, but let's not play any games here at the very least. Let's be honest and let's be truthful. it's not long-term storytelling. And to be fair, even though I don't necessarily have proof that Tony Khan outright said this outside of what Brian Alvarez is suggesting, to pretend as if Tony Khan hasn't backtracked off of anything ever in his life while stating something earlier on, or to pretend as if we don't have eyes and we don't see how he's booking Ricochet and Will Ospreay right now, for an example, just like he booked Ricochet, how he booked Will Ospreay and MJF, how he booked CM Punk and MJF, as far as how quickly they actually, and even then, I'd probably say that to a lesser degree was probably considered somewhat long-term storytelling, right? They started in November and they were consistent all the way up until March. I mean, not necessarily long, you're kind of, you know, bastardizing the word long. I mean, it was only 4 months, but that would be something if it went a little bit longer. But hey, however you cope, AEW fanboys, however you cope, let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. I promise, unless something really, really big actually happens tonight, I'm done, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. My name is Devontae, and I'll be catching you guys later. Deuces, P. Ice.